Live. We have a special guest with us today. This is Ginger, the Apogee Ops dog, and Charlotte, Ginger's mom. And so they hang out in the manufacturing and operations part of Apogee. And just thought that you'd like to meet Ginger. She's really sweet, and you know,
But she says no running in the office.
No running.
No running in the office.
She takes it easy. So
Okay,
so,
I'm going to get back to work.
Okay.
Bye, guys.
Bye, Ginger.
Bye.
See you, Ginger. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. And this week we're going to talk about, every week we talk about the most popular questions that people ask us.
Yep.
And so this week we're going to kind of continue on a theme of Pro I/O.
Right.
So talking about our kind of highest end interfaces and how to use those in bigger studio situations.
Cool.
So, Roger, I've got a few questions for you that people have asked in Ask Apogee.
Sure.
And this is quite a popular one. What is the difference between Ensemble Thunderbolt and the Symphony I/O? It's a common question.
Sure. Clearly, Ensemble Thunderbolt is for that person who wants the best all-in-one studio. So with just this interface, you have virtually everything you need, from inputs to headphone outputs, controls on the front panel, a way to hook up multiple speakers. Symphony I/O, on the other hand, is for that person who wants the absolute best of everything. They've maybe chosen their mic preamps already. Perhaps they're using an entire analog console, and they want the absolute best conversion stages. And so for that customer, Symphony I/O is the best choice. And those are the basics. Should we go further into some of the details? How far do we want to go into the details?
No, I think that the main thing that a lot of people want to know is, like, if you've got a really cool collection of outboard mic preamps or a console or a mixer or something like that, Symphony I/O is definitely the way to go. And then with Ensemble Thunderbolt, like you said, it's all in one, everything in a box. Just take it with you. It's kind of for that project studio on the go. So
exactly. Yeah.
Differences between the conversion. Now, the Symphony I/O is, of course, the best of the best.
Is definitely the flagship. So, we've been at Apogee innovating the whole idea of conversion stages now for 30 years. And every time we have a new flagship product, we will go back to the drawing board, look at the very latest components that are available, and that represents Symphony I/O Mark II, the absolute finest conversion stages that are possible with the very latest components. You think, well, yeah, sure, that's what everyone does. And in fact, what we find is a lot of competitive devices actually use very conservative designs. And it makes sense. If you want to make sure to have the most conservative investment in your engineering time, you're going to choose a proven circuit. Frankly, with Symphony I/O, we are always pushing the envelope when it comes to circuits. And so, frankly, we're a few years ahead of everyone, if not more, in the design of Symphony I/O and its conversion stages. We do things in Symphony I/O that, frankly, sometimes show up in competitive devices several years later, and sometimes some interface manufacturers never catch up.
Can't keep up.
Nope.
So this is when you're in a pro studio, a lot of people use Pro Tools, popular DAW. And there's a really common question of Pro Tools HD versus regular Pro Tools software.
Right.
From your perspective, what do you think is kind of the best? Like, okay, this is definitely the type of studio that needs an HD rig, and this is the type of studio that can get away with just regular Pro Tools software or any native DAW.
Sure. And I think that certainly that huge studio that requires so many tracks, over 32 inputs. If you're doing a scoring stage, obviously that's a Pro Tools HD rig. I think that with the power of native DSP, plus the fact that all these systems are so low latency, that makes it so the Pro Tools native hardware, I think, it really meets the needs of the vast majority of people these days. There are some ways that Pro Tools native is actually more powerful than the Pro Tools HD with the HDX system.
Interesting.
So it really is a lot more widely compatible with what people need, the Pro Tools native version.
Yeah. So, and there's actually, we kind of could dive into this. So there's the Pro Tools software.
Right, and they do make it a little confusing sometimes with their nomenclature about what is what.
So there's the entry level kind of Pro Tools software.
Right.
Then there is actually two versions of Pro Tools HD. There's the HD that runs on the HDX, the PCI cards with that sort of thing, the accelerated, and then there's the HD native, right?
Right, yeah.
So you're saying that regular Pro Tools that you can buy off the shelf with something like an Ensemble.
Yeah, with an Ensemble, just makes an incredibly low latency, incredibly powerful system.
Awesome, awesome. And one question we get a lot is, what can you connect if you do have that really big system? You're in a larger studio, post-production, that type of thing. And you want to connect to an HD PCI card.
Right.
What do you need for that, and what do we have that can make help you do that?
Right, absolutely. So to connect to an HDX Avid PCI card, that is solely Symphony IO that provides that opportunity. We offer various different versions of the Symphony IO. One of them has just our HD option card. Now, what's kind of interesting about Symphony IO is it offers up to 32 channels of analog input and output potentially. So it actually functions like two HD IOs. And then basically our Pro Tools option card has that mini DigiLink that connects directly to your Pro Tools HDX card. And we've basically adjusted the internal characteristics so that with regard to delay compensation, Symphony IO really acts, functions exactly like an HDIO, basically. Or if you've got two I/O modules, functions like two HDIOs.
Basically, so whatever you connect a Symphony IO to an HD system, it shows up automatically.
Right. Just
looks like any other interface would, and just plug and play, and you're good to go.
Yeah, very much plug and play. It's got loop sync, which is kind of the HD system's clocking. So if you want to pull out an HDIO, put in a Symphony IO, you can use all the same clock connections, and it integrates perfectly.
Awesome, pretty cool. But now Ensemble Thunderbolt, just to clarify, does not connect to those systems. So it doesn't have a DigiLink. You're not going to connect it to a Pro Tools HD system. It's for that customer who's using regular native DAWs over Thunderbolt.
Exactly, and really, as we see, it is really the big studios that are using HDX that are probably using a console, that probably have their own mic preamps and have a complete monitoring system. So the all-in-one studio, I can imagine that customer really is an Ensemble customer. So it kind of works with Pro Tools Native, all-in-one studio. That's the customer profile. Symphony IO, very large studio, perhaps often an entire analog console.
Right.
Yeah,
Makes sense. So the one thing that often gets asked is how to connect speakers and outboard gear. So if people aren't familiar, a lot of people are kind of confused by the connectors on the back of these because they're not just traditional XLR connectors.
Right.
So we've brought one with us.
Yep.
This is a DB25 or a D-sub connector. Can you explain to us a little bit about why we use these and what they're useful for?
Right. And it was back in the late 90s when Tascam was the first company to, instead of using XLR on the back of their panels, they came out with this standard. And there is absolutely no audio degradation that's presented by using this kind of connector. The advantage means that you can fit 32 channels of analog input and output in an interface this size. If we had to have 64 XLRs, there's just no way we could do that in such a compact format. Also, again, if we're thinking about Symphony IO and the big studio, a lot of those studios, in fact, most of them, will have a patch bay, and those patch bays are more and more terminated in this connector.
Anyone who's ever wired a patch bay knows that this is an absolute nightmare.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've wired some patch bays in your day. Having a D-sub connector on the back of your patch bay is like a saving from the skies.
And having spoken to some of the system integrators very recently, they will almost refuse to do direct wiring to patch bays. So ultimately, this becomes the easiest way to get into your larger studio. So Symphony IO in the large studio, you're just going to have a DB25 to DB25 to a patch bay. But if not, you've got the very simple adapter cable that is available virtually everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And man, the DB25 patch bay, when those first started coming out, I was just like, this is the best thing ever.
Right.
So, I mean, anyone who hasn't done this, wiring patch bays would take days upon days of work where you have to solder each individual connector.
Right. And then modifying, let's say you want to make the smallest change.
Yeah.
So it has really revolutionized things.
If you've got a Symphony IO, big rig with lots of outboard gear, please get a D-Sub DB25 patch bay. It'll make your life super easy.
Most definitely, yep.
Ginger the dog, DB25 patch bay.
all the way.
She's totally up on that. So we got some questions here. So Silo says here, how many ADAT channels can I use? So I guess we could break this into two parts. How many ADAT channels do you get with Ensemble Thunderbolt? And then kind of maximum, how many ADAT channels could you do with a Symphony?
Sure. So with the Ensemble Thunderbolt, we provide 2 banks of ADAT inputs and outputs. SMUX is the variant of ADAT that runs at 96K. So if I'm running at a 96 kilohertz sample rate, then I get 8 SMUX inputs, 8 SMUX outputs. Now, only with Ensemble Thunderbolt, if I'm running at 48 or 44.1, you actually do get the full 16 ADAT inputs and outputs. So in fact, you could have 8 analog inputs, 10 analog outputs, and then 16 ADAT inputs and outputs. Now, Symphony IO depending on the I/O modules, if you had 2 8x8s, you would then again get 16 channels of ADAT input and output. Honestly, I think that person who buys the Symphony IO is really interested in our conversion. And that's probably why we sell primarily, or to the great extent, the 16x16 analog card. So I think the Symphony IO user is less interested in the ADAT IO, but it's certainly available.
Yeah. And that goes into saying that the Symphony IO is this modular system, that you can add cards and remove cards as you go, and so it's really cool. We've got a cool comment here. Los here says he's running Pro Tools 12.7 HD native with an Ensemble Thunderbolt. Just completed a 5.1 mix for a film that premiered at South by. Love my Ensemble. Congrats on the film release. And that kind of is a cool segue.
Yeah, perfect segue.
We get questions a lot that is, how do I connect a surround sound monitoring system to either of these devices, and what does that look like? So what options do you have for Ensemble, and what options do you have for Symphony?
Yeah, right. So 5.1, of course, now we're into 7.1, 9.1 with the immersive audio format, 11.1 for Dolby Atmos. So the number of speakers is only growing, these multi-channel formats. Of course, the Ensemble provides 2 monitor outputs and then 8 additional analog outputs. So it does support up to 9.1. So that I can set up those analog outputs so that they are all controlled by either the front panel monitor control or your controls and software. Symphony IO with a 16x16 analog IO card, I get up to 11.1 and all the variants in between. And that's, interestingly, one of those aspects that not many audio interfaces support.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, when they find an Apogee and that it offers that support, it really solves a problem for them. And we are hearing more and more from people who are starting to get into those Dolby Atmos and those kind of newer variants on the surround formats.
If you've got a Dolby Atmos studio, please comment below and send us a picture, because that's really cool.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's a format that's emerging, and again, for people who are making audio for film, it's great opportunities for growth and really cool, like I say, business opportunities for people who are working in those formats too. So, most interfaces, when you have surround sound, you have to buy a separate monitor controller, and a good monitor controller is really expensive. Yeah. I mean, minimum $1,000, $2,000 for a good monitor controller.
Yep.
And the fact that you don't need one, you have it all kind of built in, purely clean signal outside the interface. It's a huge savings.
It really is, absolutely.
So anyone using surround sound, we'd love to see pictures of your studio. So comment below and we'd love to check them out. So other questions, we've got this new Symphony IO software that we've kind of been teasing.
Right.
We showed a little bit of it at the NAMM show for those of you who were there. We also have kind of changed our website so you can see a little sneak preview.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit more about the new Symphony Mark II software.
Right.
Everybody wants to know, when's it coming out?
Sure.
And what's it going to be? What's better?
What's involved? Yeah. The first great piece of news is it's a free update for everyone. So it's a little bit like when your new OS comes out on your device, where it gives you a brand new look to your beloved piece of gear. Mm-hmm. So we're expecting to have this new Symphony IO software out by the end of this month.
Okay.
Now here's the better news, is we've actually been sending out invitations to beta tests. So if you are a registered Symphony IO Mark II user, you should get an email to invite you. If you haven't gotten the invitation yet, you can send your request to betafeedback@apogeedigital.com, and somehow we'll put that up somewhere in some notes.
And honestly, you can write a little comment below. So if you've got a Symphony IO Mark II, you want to try out the new beta software, just comment below with your email address, and we'll send you a copy of the beta software. So
right. And some of the most popular features with the Element series, we introduced several new user-demanded features. First of all, our core audio talkback system, where you can use the built-in mic or any USB device as your talkback mic. Really simple. Mm-hmm. We also offer support for Apogee Control, which is our USB hardware remote. So you'll now be able to use that with Symphony IO. Mm-hmm. Another very often requested feature is standalone mode, whereby I can use this with my AES or ADAT IO in a very traditional sense. So I'm thinking about Windows machines that you may have an AES PCI card. You can now set that all up and completely configure Symphony IO without any Mac at all or any computer.
And for those of you who kind of know like the history of Apogee, we're kind of course, known for high quality conversion. And the earlier products were just standalone, analog in, digital out, digital in, analog out. And with this new software, you can really easily just set the Symphony that way. Right. So even we've got people quite a bit in hi-fi who are using Symphony IOs in hi-fi rigs just because the converters are that great. They're connecting them to like really high-end speakers and stuff, and standalone mode's perfect for that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And like the Element software, the new Symphony IO control is highly customizable. It can be very comprehensive. It can also be collapsed to a really efficient essentials window, we call that. Which is just a very thin strip that you can orient either vertically or horizontally or vertically. In the case of Symphony IO, it gives you all of your input metering plus control over the speaker outputs and the headphone outputs. It was really cool on the NAMM booth where we had 64 channels of metering in this very compact space. So if you were recording, you could look right on your screen and instantly see if you had overs or if signal was passing. So that idea of being able to customize the software to your workflow, however sophisticated or simple it may be. And I think that's a real important aspect to this new software.
And it looks like it's from the future.
And it's definitely from the future.
It's pretty cool. It's got this really dark UI to it. So we've got a really good question here. We've got Matthias here, who's got a Symphony Mark I. Thank you so much. That's awesome. What's the difference between Symphony Mark II? I mean, we could go on for a while, but kind of what are the hits between Symphony Mark I and Symphony Mark II?
Sure. So certainly with Mark II, like I said, every time we come out with a flagship product, we are looking for the absolute finest components we can for conversion. Mark I was developed in 2009, and so we've been able to make some incremental improvements to the conversion quality. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, when you get to the chassis of Mark II, Thunderbolt is now incorporated into the Mark II chassis. Of course, you've got the touchscreen on the front panel. You've got our constant current headphone output that we introduced with Groove. Now, that said, you certainly can run your Mark I I/O modules in a Mark II chassis. Those Mark I conversion stages are still, quite excellent performance, And the improvements we've made are very, very incremental, but still there is a great deal of value in those Mark I I/O modules as well.
You know, going through to some of the records that you've heard that have been done with those Mark I units, I mean, Adele's Hello, right?
Yeah, right.
Using Mark I. You had John Legend's,
His hits.
All of Me,
Yeah.
huge hit, done mostly on Symphony.
Yeah.
Any of you who have been tormented by watching Frozen 10 million times with your kids, that soundtrack was done on using Symphony I/O through a lot of it as well. So, I mean, you go through the hits that were done on those converters. You know, engineers like Bob Ludwig, Bob Clearmountain, Chris Lord Alge. You go down the list of people who've used the Mark I. It's the best of the best, and to see that they've gotten just even that much better.
Even that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so Jake says that Maestro could use a fresh look like the Element series, so that's kind of
Absolutely.
where we're going.
We agree. I think you'll be pleased with the new look.
So, like you said, we got some new stuff coming down there for you. But thank you guys so much for joining in. Again, if you have questions throughout the week, post below. Head to our website, apogeedigital.com, and hit on the Chat with an Apogee Expert button, or you can hit on the Ask an Apogee Expert button to send us an email. We're always here to answer your questions, and appreciate you guys tuning in and hanging out with Ginger. I think we got to go get Ginger some cookies for hanging out with us on video today.
Right.
But we'll catch you back next week, and thanks again.
All right. Thank you.